do neon cyberpunk futures make any sense anymore? Because there's so many variables to how the world works, and there's this one little problem with having corporations run the world, like fully, totally, literally, and it's CIG X minus M. CIG X minus M is the formula for GDP. It's all the economic activity in a country plus minus this and that, like investment, this and that. So the total amount of the economy is how you calculate GDP, right? And then your currency is your GDP parity. So you subdivide the gross domestic product by the number of units of currency, the number of dollars, the number of euros, the number of lira, the number of lev, whatever, right? So you end up with a world that doesn't run on trading resources, really, realistically speaking. It runs on economic activity. So if corporations truly take over, that messes up the math by a lot. And corporations inherently have periods of competence and periods of incompetence. So how do you manage that? There just simply isn't any incentive for a corporation to take over totally outside of the shadows. Because the rich people wouldn't be able to hide. And the company would be destabilized. And people would own the corporation that owns everybody. So people would just find the people who own everything and just kill them as soon as things turn bad. So it just doesn't make any sense to have mega corporations literally owning cities. It never works. Designed to towns, corporately owned designed towns never work. It just doesn't make any sense that would work at all. You can have a mercantile alternate history world where the merchants control society in a world of feudalism, but as soon as everybody has infinite access to information, it just doesn't make any sense. So, cyberpunk, the aesthetic, and corporations having too much power in the world in the future, sure, but to have a neon future, like a 1980s future, where the corporations truly, like, in your face own everything and are just blatantly telling the cops what to do, that's like a little step too far to be believable anymore. It just doesn't make any sense. I feel like it's kind of a problem about dystopian future literature, because, like, all these noir tropes, all this, I'm not the paragon hero, blah, blah, blah. That's, like, overdone to death, and it's just so cliche that it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Nobody is the paragon hero. Nobody is the average, like, beloved cop anymore, right? People inherently have a problem with police. So, what do you realistically do? Other than Altered Carbon, where you have, like, super longevity and immortals, but even then, the government has a certain level of power. Like, you have cartoonish levels of power with rich people, but the rich people are still beholden to the law. Whereas in something like Blade Runner, your corporate overlord owns you. The police department cannot go against the corporate overlord. And that's like the difference between the 80s neon future and the 20s, the teens and 20s. We know that corporations cannot literally act as kings, so we apply the normal narrative of influence. But in the 80s, you wouldn't really need the normal narrative of influence. You would, like, legitimately just order cops around. So, like, there is a psychological issue with going quite as far as the 80s. Like your boss discussing the influence of mega corporations and blah blah blah. You just, certain things, certain tropes. So, like, having criminals hunt down criminals, they just don't make sense anymore because you overthink that. You're used to overthinking things, and that's my 2 cents. There is a level of disconnect between how people perceived a dystopian future in the 80s and how we perceive the dystopian reality of corporations right now in this hypothetical future right now, because we already know how corporations work. We've already experienced it to that cartoonish degree. Am I making any sense? Like, someone write in a comment section.